Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to the John Campea podcast at the beginning of a brand new week. It's Monday, and holy shit, did you see that episode of Game of Thrones last night? If you did, make sure you've seen the review that me and Ann and Corey did as well. That's also up on the channel right now. But yeah, that was a doozy of an episode. Anyway, it's a brand new week here. Tons of stuff to talk about. So we're going to kick off the week, of course, with an episode of the John Campea podcast. Here's what's going to happen today. I've picked out 6 topics that you guys have emailed into me. Now, how do you email a topic or a question to me for the John Campea podcast? It's simple. Just email me anytime at thejohncampeapodcast@gmail.com. That's thejohncampeapodcast@gmail.com. Send on in your topic or question, and maybe you'll see it pop up here on the show. So, with all that out of the way, let's get this week started. And we start off with question number 1. And question number 1 this week comes to us from Amir. And Amir writes to us, I've been a big fan of yours for a year now. Well, thank you so much, Amir. My question is, with all of the hype and teasers, TV promos, leaked photos from on-set, and trailers released for the It movie, and only less than a month till the release, is it possible that all these things will launch expectations to astronomical degrees only to disappoint movie-goers in the end? Well, thanks a lot for the question, Amir. And yeah, it is getting closer and closer. And it's funny, like you guys have probably heard me mention this before, but you know, when they first announced that they were doing an It movie, of course, based on the Stephen King novel that was then turned into a miniseries back in the 80s, I believe, or 80s or early 90s, I think it was the 80s, that they were doing a movie version of it, I honestly didn't know what to think. I wasn't that excited about it. I actually kind of thought, this is probably going to be throwaway. Maybe it won't even happen. But I got to tell you, man, the marketing for this movie has done its job. The job of the marketing and the trailers in particular is to get you excited or more excited for a movie that's coming. And these trailers have done it. These trailers have convinced me that they've got the right tone that they're going for, that they seem to have the right idea for this movie. And I don't often get really hyped or excited for horror films per se, and I enjoy a good horror film. But I'm telling you, they have knocked the marketing out of the park on this. Now, as far as your question goes, Amir, though, it's like, with all the stuff that's coming out, I'll be honest with you, I don't feel like there's been a lot more stuff than a normal movie would have. Like, yes, I've seen before other movies, them doing, here's a special clip from our upcoming movie, It, and that's not normal. That's a little bit more. But to be honest, it's not like the movie's had 14 different trailers. And it's not like there have been 27 different TV spots. I mean, they've gone pretty heavy on the marketing, but not outside what I would consider normal parameters for a big film. So, and you know, the other thing is you're wondering if the expectation levels are getting so high that, you know, the moviegoer isn't going to be able to be helped but to feel disappointed, like it can't possibly live up to the hype. And I've got to disagree with you there. I think people are getting excited for it, but I haven't sensed either from my own viewings or from my interaction with film fans. And the best part of my job is I get to interact with hundreds and thousands of film fans every single day. But I haven't sensed from my interactions a super level of hype. I'm sensing excitement. I think people are looking forward to this movie and people are expecting that this movie looks like it's going to be pretty good. But I haven't been sensing these over, you know, in the stratosphere level of expectations for this film that it's becoming unrealistic. I haven't talked to many people who think this is going to be the best film of the year, and I haven't talked to a lot of people that seem to think this is going to be a top 10 best film of the year. I'm just sensing from a lot of people an excitement that this is going to be a good movie, and that's worth getting excited about. So, is it possible for a movie to overhype itself and for the fans to pile on the hype and start to overhype a movie to the point that we can't help but be disappointed when it actually comes out? Absolutely, that's possible. We've seen that happen historically a few times, but I just don't sense that with it. All I'm sensing with it is that people are expecting a good movie, whereas maybe 6 months ago they weren't. That people are looking forward to seeing the movie, where maybe 6 months ago they weren't. And that people are just getting excited about it. But I'm not sensing that out of the ballpark level of hype that tends to happen to some films, I think we're pretty safe from that so far. Who knows? Maybe it'll reach a fevered pitch in the next week or two before the movie comes out. But as of right now, I think we're doing pretty good. Thanks a lot for the question, Amir. All right. The next question comes to us from Jake Cleveland. And Jake Cleveland writes, what has always upset me is I've always heard about how powerful Yoda is. But the one time you see him fight, he either loses to the Emperor or holds his own but doesn't dominate Count Dooku like I expected. Don't get me wrong, I love Yoda, but am I missing something? Well, thanks a lot for the question, Jake. I love taking Star Wars questions, and this will be a good time to let you guys know that I have heard you. I've gotten a lot of email from you guys saying, why are you not doing a weekly Star Wars video? Like, because everybody knows Star Wars is my life. I mean, my wife is more important to me than Star Wars, and my immediate family, my mom and dad, my brothers and sisters are more important to me than Star Wars. But I'm sorry, Carter, and all my other nephews and nieces. After that, Star Wars is number one. I love my nephews and nieces. Star Wars comes before y'all. Don't worry. Star Wars only comes out once a year. So yeah, Star Wars is a big deal to me. And so why am I not doing that? So I've decided that yes, I get enough emails from you guys with Star Wars related stuff that I am going to start doing a Star Wars weekly video. And I did a little poll on my Twitter to ask, is the best day either Saturday, Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday? And it was pretty much, they were all in the 20%. It was really close. So I have opted that starting tomorrow, we are going to have a Star Wars Tuesday video. It's going to be called Star Wars Tuesdays. I'm going to be doing it where I'm going to talk about a couple things that have happened in the world of Star Wars news, just one or two, but really I want to focus the show on the questions and topics that you guys send in, much like a daily John Campea podcast, except it's going to be weekly and specific just to Star Wars talk. So Star Wars Tuesdays is coming, guys. Hang on. Now let's get to Jake's specific question here, asking about Yoda. Well, okay, yeah, we've seen Yoda in two big fights, one against Count Dooku and one against the Emperor. We're hearing about how powerful Yoda is. Okay, but dude, put context into your thinking here. Count Dooku, he beat Dooku to the point that Dooku had to turn around and run. And we just saw how powerful Dooku was. Dooku just took out Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi and took them both out single-handedly. And he was about to murder them both. And Yoda comes in, schools the fool, to the point that Yoda goes, okay, fought well you have. You've done well. Congratulations, you fought well. But now I'm going to smack your ass. And Dooku basically then has to come up with a diversion so he can hightail it and get his ass out of there. And he ran. Okay, so Dooku, a Sith Lord who just single-handedly beat Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker, turned like the little chicken shit he was and ran away. Bravely ran away, away. Name that movie. Anyway, so he turned his tail and ran. That's significant. That is power. That is strength. That is skill. That's the badass. That is Yoda. Okay? So don't downplay the fight he had with Dooku. Don't say, well, he held his own against Dooku. He beat Dooku's ass to the point that Dooku had to turn around and run away. That's the base. And that fight only lasted a minute. I mean, it's a minute, less than a minute. And then Dooku's like, this guy's going to kick my ass. Turn around and ran. Okay, so keep that in mind. Now let's move on to the Emperor. Again, put context into your thinking. The Emperor just slaughtered, was it 4 or 5? I can't remember off the top of my head. 4 or 5 members of the Jedi Council. Of the Council. These are the biggest badass Jedis in the galaxy, and single-handedly, he took out 3 or 4 of them in about 5 seconds, and then kind of let Mace Windu hang in there because he knew Anakin was coming, and this was his final push to get Anakin turned. He wiped out 4 or 5 of the best Jedi Knights in the galaxy. 3 or 4 of them in under like 15 seconds. When it was 4 or 5 against 1. That's the dude that Yoda then went in and fought. And Yoda did some ass kicking in that thing. I mean, he beat the Emperor. He delivered some pretty damn good shots on the Emperor, and the Emperor was worried. The Emperor Palpatine was worried. Now, Palpatine won that fight by the skin of his teeth, and yes, he won the fight. But again, context. This is the same guy who just took out 4 or 5 members of the Jedi Council in seconds, and Yoda came this close to beating the dude. And then eventually he got overpowered, and he left, and he survived to, live another day and train Luke Skywalker to ultimately lead to the defeat of the Empire. So when you're talking about Yoda and how powerful he is, don't underestimate the fact that he made a guy who just beat Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker 2-on-1. He beat them. Yoda made the dude turn around and run away. And with the Emperor, he went toe-to-toe with the dude and came very close to beating him. And this is the dude who just took out multiple members of the Jedi Council in seconds single-handedly. So, yeah, Yoda is worth talking about. Yoda is the man. Don't underestimate his power. Those 2 examples you gave, think about the entire context about it. So anyway, great question. Thanks a lot for sending it in. Let's move on to the next question. And the next question today comes to us from Keyshawn Watkins, who writes, now that Ike Perlmutter is no longer CEO of Marvel, and The Defenders has been released on Netflix to early positive reviews, will Kevin Feige finally allow the ABC and Netflix characters to join the big scene heroes in an upcoming Marvel film, specifically Avengers Infinity War or Avengers 4? Since they're all set in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and they keep saying it's all connected, is Infinity War the right time to show that it is indeed all connected? Well, one of the things that Keyshawn is mentioning here is that Ike Perlmutter. Some of you may not know who that is. Ike Perlmutter, for the longest time, was actually Kevin Feige's boss. I mean, Ike Perlmutter is the CEO of Marvel. And then for a while, he kind of let Kevin Feige run the movie side, but under Ike's supervision. And there was a lot of, they had a lot of clashes, Kevin Feige and Ike Perlmutter. And then what happened was Disney, the big bosses at Disney, like Bob Iger, stepped in and said, okay, Kevin Feige is now running the movie division. He doesn't have to answer to Ike anymore. And Ike will continue to run Marvel properties and will run the television side. So there was a big blow up between Ike and Kevin Feige. They did not function well. They might have had a good personal relationship. I don't know, but professionally, they weren't seeing eye to eye, and they had different points of view. So Disney stepped in, separated the two. So now the television universe and the movie universe are even more separated than before. But it wasn't just the Ike Perlmutter situation. Some of you remember a couple of years ago, Disney and Marvel and Kevin Feige held this big event in Hollywood. It was kind of like a Hall H thing, but it was just for them to talk about Marvel films, and they announced Civil War, and they brought out, all that kind of stuff. But it was at that event, because I was there. I was physically there at the event. It was held at the El Capitan Theater in the historical theater in Hollywood, and I was there. And, they talked a little bit about television. Kevin Feige took some Q&A afterwards, and they talked about television. And Kevin Feige made it pretty clear that he saw them as two separate things. He saw the television stuff and the movie stuff as two different things. I don't think he liked the fact that not Avengers, but that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was so closely connected to the movie universe. The impression I got from Kevin Feige, and I've gotten together and spoken with Kevin on a number of occasions, and the impression I always got from him was that he was never that big, and he was never all that happy about the fact that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was being so closely connected to the Marvel universe. So there was that. So Ike Perlmutter now no longer being a part of the picture in no way closes the gap between the television world and the Marvel world, because Kevin Feige himself never really wanted to have that much connection between the television world and the television world and the movie world, I should say. So, I mean, I don't really see things changing much. And you mentioned The Defenders, and I have my review of The Defenders up on my YouTube channel right now. If you haven't seen it, just look under reviews on my YouTube channel. You'll see my review for The Defenders. I liked it. I like Defenders, which is great because I wasn't all that thrilled with Luke Cage. And I certainly didn't like Jessica Jones, and I did not like Iron Fist. But I thought Defenders was pretty good. The interesting thing, though, is if you watch Defenders only kind of creates more separation between the television universe and the movie universe. I mean, because in the entire season of The Defenders, there's one very vague reference made by a call-in person on a radio show mentioning the incident. Didn't say the Chitauri alien invasion, didn't say when the Avengers came to say, just said the incident. That's it. Other than that one passing vague phrase, the incident, there is no reference whatsoever to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. None. And really, if the Defenders was trying to set itself as being truly in the same cinematic universe, then like New York is at stake. That's not giving away a spoiler. In every Netflix series, New York is at stake. But New York is under threat of being destroyed. And at no time did anybody stop to say, you think maybe we should call the Avengers? You think maybe Iron Man might want to know about this? You think maybe we can get Falcon down here to help out this because we've got some superpowered enemies here and they're going to destroy New York City and the Avengers don't live too far away from here. Maybe, possibly, might be a good idea to call in the Avengers. Could be a good thought, but they don't do that. They don't even mention the Avengers. None of that comes up. So in that way, the Netflix series with Defenders have only doubled down even more that their Netflix universe is its own universe. Yes, there is a newspaper article in a frame on a wall behind a reporter's desk that shows the incident. And yes, one radio caller phones in and references the incident, and that's it. Other than that, it's gone. So no, I don't think we're ever going to see Daredevil, Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, Iron Fist. We're not going to see any of these people in the Avengers movies. We're just not. And we shouldn't. This is Marvel being smart. The Netflix, because you know what? You know how if they were truly in the same cinematic universe, Defenders would have been boring. They would have run into their first thing. They would have realized, oh, we got these superpowered opponents and the fate of New York City is at hand. They're going to destroy the city. Right there, the Defenders ends and it becomes Avengers 3.5 because then the Avengers come in and clean everything up. I like that we've got these characters. I like that these characters get to operate in their own universe, free from Iron Man and Ant-Man and Doctor Strange and Thor and Hulk and Captain America and Black Widow and all that kind of. They are their own universe and they tell their stories in a shell. And I love it. I absolutely love it. This is the way it should be done. And I think Marvel's doing it the right way. No, do not cross them over. I don't think they have any plans to cross them over. And I'm glad they're not going to cross them over. But anyway, you guys may have a totally separate point of view, which is great. If you have a different point of view on that, I'd love to hear your reasoning. Jump into the comments section and leave your thoughts. Thanks a lot for the question, Keyshawn. All right, let's move on to the next question now. And the next question today comes to us from Ted Dracott, who writes, Hey, John, big fan of the show. Thank you so much, Ted. I found you a few months ago and I've watched every video since. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. My question is, why is Infinity War being hyped up as the culmination of the MCU? Technically, doesn't that title go to Avengers 4? I have heard Kevin Feige and the Russo brothers talk about Avengers 3 being the culmination. So let's say one wanted to rewatch all the past MCU films in prep. Do we do it for Infinity War or for Avengers 4? Thanks a lot for the question, Ted, and it's a great question. You're not the only person asking this question right now. Because yeah, we've all heard that Avengers Infinity War, this is the culmination that everything has happened in the MCU so far has built up to this moment, Avengers 3, Infinity War. But then we're all like, well, okay, what about Avengers 4? Like, shouldn't that be the culmination? The answer to that is no, not necessarily. I mean, look, this goes back to that old argument that I won, by the way, that Avengers 3 and 4 was not one movie split in two. I remember I took so much shit about that when I told people Avengers 3 and 4 is not the next Avengers movie being split in two. They were always planned as two separate movies. And people go, no, John, it's called Infinity War Part 1 and Infinity War Part 2. That means it's being split in half. It's like, no, you idiots. No, it's not. No, it's not. It's not. This was not a situation like Hunger Games where they took the final book and split the book in two to make two movies out of it. This isn't like Twilight, where they made one movie for each book, but then they took the final book and split it into two movies. This isn't like Harry Potter, where they made one movie for each book and then took the final book and split it into two movies instead of one. And they came one right after the other. This was something totally different. Avengers 3 and 4 were always planned as two separate films that other movies would happen in between. When something was really split in half, Hunger Games, Twilight, Harry Potter, those movies came one after the other. It wasn't one Harry Potter movie, then a few Harry Potter universe movies, then the second part. No, one right after the other. And Kevin Feige's confirmed this a number of times, that Avengers 3 and 4, although they were going to name them Infinity War Part 1 and Part 2 for a while, they were never one film split into two films. They were always planned as two separate films with a couple of other MCU movies in between them, okay? So let's get that straight. But anyway, yeah, on its surface, you'd think, well, then Avengers 4 should be the culmination, right? But not necessarily. They could have in mind, I mean, really, we don't know anything about the movie really yet, Avengers Infinity War, Avengers 3. We really don't know anything about the movie yet. So they very well could be using this movie to be the culmination of everything that has happened up until that point. And then we got a couple of other MCU movies coming out after Infinity War before Avengers 4. Then maybe Avengers 4 takes some of the themes from Avengers 3, but starts a new thing that then goes and launches into Spider-Man Homecoming 2, which is the first MCU movie after Avengers 4. So while on its surface, yeah, it makes sense to think that Avengers 4 would be the culmination. Depending on how they have it planned out, it could very well make sense that Avengers 3 Infinity War is the true culmination of everything, and then that spins off, the events of that then spin off into what the events of 4 will be, but the culmination was 3. Again, I don't know that. I'm just speculating based on the information we have in front of us. But let's wait and see how it plays out. I have a feeling, though, that they are going to use 3 as the culmination and then launch new things from there. But like everything else, we're just going to have to wait and see how that actually pans out. All right, thanks a lot for the question, Ted. Let's move on to the next question. And the next question today comes to us from Olle Henriksson, who writes, do you think the creators, David Benioff and Dan Weiss, made a misstep by beginning their production of Game of Thrones based on George R.R. Martin's books before Martin had finished his story? As an avid book reader myself, I can see how the show slowly draws away from the source material and begins making up their own story arcs. Now the show is completely past the books, and it absolutely has a different flavor and way quicker pace than the previous seasons. Well, thanks a lot for the question, Olle. And do I think that the creators of the show made a mistake by not waiting until all the books were done? No. They didn't make a mistake. The very fact that Game of Thrones is the biggest worldwide phenomenon on television kind of speaks that truth, that they didn't make a mistake. And really, when they started making them, I mean, just George R.R. Martin sat on his ass and enjoyed his celebrity and being famous. I mean, and hey, I don't blame him. Don't blame him one little bit. But remember, he was supposed to have the new books done by now. They were supposed to be done. And they're years late from when he said they were going to be available. So actually, they started the Game of Thrones show with tons of time for the new books to come out and to follow those books if they wanted to. But George R.R. Martin didn't do it. And so what are they supposed to do? Stop production? Stop what they're doing? You're right. The new episodes definitely have a little bit of a different feel to them. Their pace is certainly much different. And you know what? I think it's been awesome. I think it's been awesome. Now, that's not me casting shade on the seasons that have been based on George R.R.'s work. Not at all. I think this season is only awesome because they're built on the foundation of all the shows they did based on George Martin's work. Absolutely. 100%. This is George Martin's baby. Totally. And even though they're deviating and doing their own thing now, they're only able to do that and do it successfully because of the work George Martin did. But I got to tell you, as a fan of the show and as someone who has not read the books, and remember, the job of a television show or a movie that is based on a book or comic books is not to be as faithful to the book or comic books as possible. The job of the television show or movie is to make the best television show or movie possible. That's the job. Okay? It's not to be 100% true to the original source material. It's to be as good of a movie or a TV show as possible. And sometimes you need to deviate in order to do that because a book and the visual medium are two different mediums and they'll have different needs and different requirements. And I got to tell you, somebody who is watching the show, I've really enjoyed this season of Game of Thrones so far. We're only we're 1 week away now from the season finale. It sucks that they're only doing 7 episodes this year. But anyway, I think they've done a fantastic job. I think everything feels true to the Game of Thrones world that they've set up, even if it feels different than the book did now. I think it feels very true and very consistent with the rest of it. Yes, they have picked up the pace. Yes, traveling far distances now happens within the span of one show instead of over the arc of 3 or 4 episodes. Yes, they've done all that, but I think that has worked. I think it has benefited the show. And honestly, I'm enjoying this season immensely, even though it's deviating now from what the books are. The question now is, what's George R.R. Martin going to do? Is George R.R. Martin still going to make his own books that are totally different from the show? Or is he going to base his books now on the events of the show? It's going to be interesting to see how that works out. All right, now we move on to the final question of the day. And the final question today comes to us from Juan David Alejo, who writes, "Big fan of yours since the movie blog days." Thank you so much, Juan. I appreciate that. "My question is on production decisions. Undoubtedly, the new Star Wars trilogy is critic-proof and just about guaranteed to be a hit. Why doesn't the production company just make all 3 movies at one time to save on production costs? It seemed to work well with the Lord of the Rings franchise." Well, thanks a lot for the question, Juan. First of all, let me address the one statement you made, that Star Wars is critic-proof. Nothing is critic-proof. You want proof of that? Look at the latest Transformers movie. They made like less than half of what the previous movie did. You think Transformers is critic-proof? Nope. Now, there have been examples where movies that were bad made big amounts of money, and people go and say, see, it's critic-proof. Well, guess what? It may have made a lot of money, but it would have made a hell of a lot more money if it had been good. Don't ever fool yourself into thinking any movie. I talked to studio reps. I'm not making this up. I got this from studio reps, from Warner Brothers reps, from Disney reps, from Universal people. They've all told me the same thing. There's no such thing as critic-proof, and they know it. Sure, they may be able to put out a movie and they fail at it and it's a bad movie, but still make a lot of money. Okay, that's great. But they'll lose sleep over how much money it could have made if it had been better. They know that if their movie was better, it would have made more money. And there are movies that get great critical responses that don't make a lot of money. But the studios know, imagine how much less money it would have made if it wasn't good and it didn't get good ratings. Yes, critics matter. The reviews that come out all matter. Don't fool yourself into thinking there's anything that is critic-proof. The studios know there's not. Anyway, moving on from that sort of thing. So you're asking the question, why not just shoot all 3 movies at once? I mean, it worked for Lord of the Rings. Here's the problem. What we as film fans often do is we look for something that worked once and say, see, it works. It should always be done that way. But we ignore all the other times that one thing was tried and failed. Like I remember when Deadpool came out and it was an R-rated comic book movie and everybody went, see? All comic book movies should be rated R. Yeah, but they're ignoring the 8 other R-rated comic book movies that came out and failed. So what we have a tendency to do is point to the one thing that seems to back up what we want and say, see, there's proof. This is the way it should be done. But there were like 5 other examples of it not working. So how do you weigh that out? Yes, did it work for Lord of the Rings? It did. But Lord of the Rings was a very different situation. Lord of the Rings was based on a set story of 3 books. And the books weren't going to change. Those are the movies, those are the stories that were going to get told. They were staying fairly close to the source material. Obviously, Lord of the Rings took a lot of liberties. But as far as the overall, encompassing structure of the stories went, they stayed pretty close to it. They stayed pretty true. So that really wasn't going to change. But then let's look at another high-profile scenario. Look at The Matrix. They shot The Matrix sequels back-to-back. Said, oh, the first Matrix worked. That means Matrix 2 and 3 are going to work. Let's just shoot them back to back and not leave ourselves any room for adjustments, not leave ourselves any room for reevaluating or new creative thinking. Let's just shoot them back to back and trust they're going to be awesome. And look what happened. They didn't impress. People weren't happy and they turned out bad. You see, what happens is you put out a film, you can think a movie's going to be great. And I talk about this all the time. But every filmmaker and every writer and every director, they think their movie's going to be great when they start. They've got a vision for it. They think it's going to be great. And it's not until after you're done shooting the movie And then you go and you sit down, and now you're long after the movie is done shooting, and now you're in post-production, the edit's coming together, and you're getting close to finishing it, that you really start to get a sense about whether this movie's good or not. It's not until it's in that edit. And that's why companies like Warner Brothers and DC and Marvel and Disney, they purposefully now build into their big blockbuster, big budget films, they build in reshoot time into their schedules and their budgets, because they know no matter how good we think this movie is on paper right now, we're not going to know for sure until it starts getting close to being finished in an edit. And we got to leave ourselves some room to go back and reshoot to fix the problems that come up or to make the improvements for the new ideas that we have. And the thing is, if you make a bad movie, let's say you shoot Star Wars 7, 8, and 9 all back to back. Well, what you then take away, you steal from yourself, is the ability to finish episode 7, really sit back, see how it turned out, see how the audiences responded to it, and then now make some adjustments and put that into your planning process for episode 8 to hopefully make episode 8 even better. If you just shoot them back to back and all at once and all that kind of stuff, you are robbing yourself of the needed time to be able to evaluate what you've done so far, make adjustments moving forward, because you just don't know until it's done. Until the movie is done, you just don't know. Again, Lord of the Rings is a bit of an exception because it was based on 3 existing time-honored books that you're not going to change that much. And they weren't going to give, Peter Jackson much more of a budget than they gave him. So he had to make every dollar stretch, and they made it happen. But with Star Wars, I think it's a different situation. I think you got to handle it differently with Star Wars. You should make one movie. Give yourself some breathing room. See how the audience reacts to it. Then go into everything else. Just buy yourself that time and don't feel the need to rush it. And I believe there are some situations when it's a good idea to shoot it all at once. I just don't think Star Wars is one of those situations. But anyway, that's just my thought on it. You guys may have a totally different opinion. I would love to hear your thoughts. If you got thoughts on that or any of the other stuff that we talked about here today, jump into the comment section, leave your thoughts below. That'll do it for this installment of the John Campea podcast, guys. Let's hope we have a great week. And listen, if you're one of the people that enjoys my videos that I put out every single day, why don't you check out the link in the description below to my Patreon page. Consider becoming one of my Patreon supporters. Click that link down there and get more information. And listen, while you're here, make sure you take a second, click the subscribe button, become a subscriber to my YouTube channel, and make sure you're following me on social media. Follow me on Twitter, simply @John Campea. That'll do it for me, guys, for now. Thanks a lot for joining me, and until the next video, bye-bye.